When Burt Bacharach wrote the classic song Raindrops Keep Fallin on My Head for the 1969 Western Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, the composer certainly had a right to feel as if there was a dark cloud looming over him. Just a few years previous, Burt's wife had given birth to a premature daughter who weighed less than 2 pounds. The baby survived and lived an incredibly troubled life before committing suicide at age 40. Before that, she'd been locked in a mental asylum for 10 years. Upon her suicide, Burt's daughter left him a note. To this day, the 93-year-old composer refuses to read it. Join Facts Verse as we explore why Burt Bacharach won't read the note his daughter left behind. Burt Bacharach had a hard time writing his memoir. When it came time for Burt to write his memoir, he knew there was going to be one subject that would be particularly difficult for him to broach. That was, of course, the subject of his deceased daughter, who killed herself in 2007 at age 40. His daughter's name was Nikki, and her mother was Angie Dickinson. Angie had been Burt's second wife, and Burt has remarried twice since divorcing her. Many feel it was the stress of attempting to raise the troubled Nikki that caused Burt and Angie's marriage to fall apart. The troubles that caused Nikki to kill herself had been plaguing her for her entire life, and Burt still has deep regrets about the way he chose to help her. Today, Burt Bacharach is 93 and seems to be happily married to his fourth wife, whom he married in 1993, Jane Hansen. Burt is best known to the public for his numerous contributions to the world of popular music. He composed classic songs like Raindrops Keep Fallin on My Head. When he wrote the song for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Burt and then-wife Angie were having a hard time with the young girl's behavioral issues. In those years, doctors didn't know what to make of Nikki's behavior. Shortly before her suicide, Angie Dickinson came to realize her daughter suffered from Asperger's. Burt's daughter had undiagnosed Asperger's syndrome. By the time Angie happened upon the magazine article that gave her the revelation that her daughter suffered from Asperger's syndrome, she and Burt had been separated for many years. Burt and Angie had Nikki when their marriage was relatively new, and the tumultuous birth and ensuing difficulty raising the girl struck a blow to their relationship that it never recovered from. At the time of Nikki's birth, she weighed a little less than 2 pounds. This was a result of her being born prematurely. Angie had been advised to remain in bed as her pregnancy was deemed at risk. Regrettably, she chose to ignore this advice. Because of this, she got an infection and went into labor early. Upon Nikki's birth, Burt and Angie believed there was no way she'd make it through the night. Miraculously, the premature baby seemed to take to the incubator she was placed in at the hospital. 3 months following Nikki's premature birth, her parents were allowed to bring her home. Burt and Angie thought it would be smooth sailing following the birth, but Nikki sadly began exhibiting behavior problems early on. These only got worse as time went on, and it would be many decades before the realization of Asperger's syndrome would give Burt and Angie any idea how to treat their daughter. Angie put aside work for her daughter. When Nikki was still young, Angie received the role that still stands today as her most popular. That was the titular role in the TV series Policewoman. Sadly, following the success of the series, Angie turned down other lucrative roles to spend more time with Nikki, who was beginning to exhibit more and more troublesome behavior. The trouble at home drove Burt and Angie apart, and they eventually divorced. Towards the end of Nikki's life, she was much closer to her mother than her father. In fact, it seems Burt didn't have much contact with either Nikki or Angie by the turn of the century. From Burt's perspective, he thought things were going relatively well with Nikki by the time she decided to kill herself. According to Burt, he thought the worst of Nikki's days were behind her. She had exhibited extreme behavioral problems her whole life and often threatened to kill herself at the drop of a hat. Burt had come to take the threats with a grain of salt. By 2007, Burt had assumed Nikki was past these behaviors thanks to her mother's realization she suffered from Asperger's. Sadly, the diagnosis of Asperger's should have meant Nikki finally got the treatment she deserved, but this wasn't the case. Instead, those close to Nikki have suggested her final years were the worst of her life. Considering she was imprisoned in a mental asylum for a decade, this is certainly saying something. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to Facts Verse if you haven't already. And stick around for more about Burt Bacharach and his daughter. The details of Nikki Bacharach's 2007 suicide. It's been said that after reading about Asperger's syndrome, Angie Dickinson tried to spend as much time with Nikki as possible and rarely left her alone. Nikki committed suicide by placing a plastic bag over her head and suffocating, and she left behind a note for her father. But it seems that 93-year-old Burt has still yet to read this note, claiming he knows what it says. It seems Burt still has many regrets about how he handled things with Nikki. Following Burt's divorce from Angie, the composer spent a significantly reduced amount of time with his daughter. Nikki exhibited severe behavioral issues throughout her childhood, and these peaked during adulthood. It was during this peak that Burt and Angie decided to have their daughter confined to a mental asylum for 10 years. Burt chose to focus on his music. While Burt was dealing with his troubles relating to Nikki, he escaped into his music. And he still works on his music today. It helps him escape from the guilt he has about how he treated his daughter. Burt Bacharach always showed promise. Burt was born in 1928 and started playing piano at the behest of his mother. As Burt recalls, he wasn't initially fond of being forced to play the instrument, but he eventually developed a taste for jazz and found himself sneaking into jazz clubs as a young adult. When Burt realized that being a piano player meant you got all the girls, he became infinitely grateful to his mother for forcing him to play the instrument all those years previously. A notorious womanizer. While Burt has always had a thing for music, it seems he also has always had a thing for women. He's been married 4 times, but these 4 wives are far from the only women he's been with. In fact, he developed a reputation during his heyday for being one of the most notorious womanizers in the industry. All 3 of Burt's failed marriages were plagued with incidents of the composer lusting after and sleeping with other women. But perhaps Burt has put this poor behavior behind him, as his marriage to his 4th wife seems to be going well after nearly 30 years together. Burt Bacharach's Bad Blood. After studying at McGill University in Montreal, Burt started his songwriting career. He initially found himself behind the times. However, pairing up with a lyricist named Hal David proved the ticket to his success. Together, the pair began selling songs left and right, finding particular success with recording artist Dionne Warwick. Sadly, the relationship between the pair and Dionne ended in lawsuits over rights and royalties. The relationship between Burt and Hal ended similarly poorly, with them getting into a disagreement while working on a film score. In 1965, Burt married Angie Dickinson, and the two had Nikki the following year. After divorcing Angie, he went on to marry a songwriter named Carol Bayer Sager. They divorced in 1991, leading to Burt marrying 4th and final wife Jane Hansen in 1993. Jane is a ski instructor. Now it's time to hear from you. Which part of this story was most surprising to hear? Let us know in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.